Hello, and a huge welcome to everyone today. Thanks to everyone that's tuned in. I hope everyone's settled and ready to go in their part of the country. It's warm here, but not exactly sunny where I am. So if it's the same where you are, then at least we're not missing out on any sunshine today. Hopefully it's saving itself for the weekend. Okay, so the format of today's webinar is that I'm going to provide a short introduction to Apprenticemakers. Then I'll hand over to Mike Maynard and Freya Ward from Napier Partnerships to talk about their apprenticeship journey, and then I'll give an overview of how to approach the apprenticeship process. After that, there'll be an opportunity for questions from everyone tuned in today. Today's webinar is scheduled to last 1 hour, but we've kept it quite simple in terms of number of speakers, so we may even finish a bit early today, so we'll see how we go. Okay, so it's fantastic today to welcome Mike and Freya from Napier. Hi Mike, hi Freya, are you there?
Hi.
Hello, hi. I know you're just brushing your lunch before we started, but I think we're all good to go. So Napier is a B2B technology PR agency that uses market insight to develop PR and marketing campaigns for their clients. And I understand your clients are in the UK, the US and Europe, so pretty much all over the world, and include some pretty big names in the world of technology, such as 24/7, Polar, Panasonic. And well, when I looked at your client page, there's about 56 clients on there. Is that right?
Yeah,
quite
there's
an extensive client base there. Yeah. You've got around 15 employees, so I guess it might be considered small compared to some of the big apprentice employers in England. However, as anyone who's run or worked in a business of that size will know, that number of people can deliver a considerable amount of projects, and it can be a pretty busy place to be. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, no, certainly we've got a lot going on at the moment.
Yeah. So when it comes to recruitment and employing people, it's important that the system is straightforward and that the right candidate is brought into the business. So the reason I asked Mike and Freya to get involved today was that I first saw this presentation at an apprenticeships event hosted by the West Sussex FSB a month or so ago. And I thought they were a really fantastic example of a business that had made apprenticeships work really well for them. And being a technology-focused business, it was also great to see how apprenticeships were working well for a business that's not always traditionally associated with apprenticeships. So as I mentioned, following their presentation, I'll give an overview of how to recruit an apprentice for those businesses that are new to the process. And after that, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. And please feel free to submit any questions in the question tool that you'll see on your webinar panel as we go through. And if they're really pressing, I'll try my best to bring these up at an appropriate point in proceedings. If not, I'll save them till the end. So after all of that, I better introduce myself. I'm Sophie Hardwick, and I run Apprenticemakers. And because there's going to be many people today that are also new to Apprenticemakers, I thought it might be useful for me to give a quick overview about that as well. So how did Apprenticemakers come about? What is it all about? So around 3 years ago, there was something called the Holt Review drafted for the government, and it was written by a small business owner called Jason Holt, who runs a jewellery business in London. And he was asked to identify many ways in which apprenticeships could be made more accessible to small businesses. And one of the things he identified in that process was that lots of businesses that had experienced apprenticeships were really keen to champion them for other businesses. And that was really good news, because small businesses often trust the opinion and experience of another small business more than any other source of advice or support. So it was recommended in that report that there was a facility for peer-to-peer mentoring and peer-to-peer knowledge sharing between businesses. And that led to us getting involved, Small Firms Enterprise Development Initiative, SEDI for short, who I work for. And we set up Apprenticemakers, working with Jason and the National Apprenticeship Service. So how does it look today? Its objective was to create a platform where peer support could be possible. And so its core activity is around knowledge sharing. So it's got an online community to enable businesses to make connections. Businesses large and small can join Apprenticemakers for free. And when they join, they're asked to complete a short online form to ask about whether or not their business has taken on apprentices or would like to, the sector they work in, the size of their business, their role in the business, where they're located, and whether it's a startup or a well-established business. That's just to help the directory have some fields where people can search for different things that are of interest to them. Everyone that signs up appears on the Apprenticemakers map, which is also searchable. And this is a great way to get a quick snapshot of Apprenticemakers in your area. There's also Apprenticemakers Plus training, which is for those that are keen to develop their small business mentoring skills. So if you have taken on apprentices and you really like the idea of championing them and supporting another small business through the process, there is some mentor training for free that you can do on Apprenticemakers as well, and we call that Apprenticemakers Plus. And so, as I mentioned before, there's a forum where businesses can ask questions, which will go to the whole community, and we've recently launched groups where people can join regional or sector groups of interest to them and ask questions to those groups. These are growing. They're still quite small, but they're growing. And it's beginning to act as a hub for regional apprenticeship ambassadors too. So National Apprenticeship Service for a number of years has had ambassadors in regions across England. And Apprenticemakers is starting to create ambassador groups that can connect and discuss issues themselves, but they can also invite businesses to get involved, and they can be there as a source of support for particular regional groupings. Okay. So, alongside the community, there's also lots of resources. So this that you see in front of you now is the Small Business Guide to Apprenticeships. It has this really handy flow diagram, and I refer to this guide a bit at the end when I talk about the apprenticeship process. So if you hear me talking about the Small Business Guide to Apprenticeships, I'm talking about this particular guide, which is actually quite a large PDF with loads and loads of really useful information for small businesses. And we're also really proud of the bank of case studies, and we've recently launched a video playlist where we curate a collection of videos from YouTube about small businesses and apprenticeships. So if you're a small business and you've taken on an apprentice, let us know and we can do a case study, and it's a great thing to add to the site. And it's a really useful thing if you're trying to work out whether there's a case study in the marketing sector. You can search by sector and find a case study and get some really good ideas for how to approach it for your business. Apprenticemakers has also got its own app, which means that when someone emails you on Apprenticemakers or connects, you can get a notification icon on your phone, and it's much like Facebook, and you can respond there and then. So it's quite a good way to use Apprenticemakers on the move as well, which is often, on trains and things when people have the time to have a think about that kind of thing and ask questions. So that's there for businesses that are doing all sorts of things that are often out and about as well. So please go, take a look around, and please come and contact me if you've got any questions at all about how you'd like to get involved. And so on with the webinar. Are you still there, Mike and Freya?
Yes, we're here.
Great, great. I think we can hear you quite well. Is it okay if I hand over to you at this stage?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Great stuff. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, everybody, is I'm just handing over ownership of the webinar over to Mike and Freya at the other end of the country, and they are going to talk about their apprenticeship's journey.
Okay, so hopefully everyone can see the screen now. I'm going to talk for a little bit, give some background as to how Napier got into apprenticeships and why we hired our first apprentice. And then I'm also going to get Freya to talk about her experience and how she felt an apprenticeship benefited her. We'll probably be talking for about 15 to 20 minutes, so it's a fairly short presentation. As Sophie mentioned, I'm the Managing Director of Napier. We're a PR and marketing agency that works with technology companies. So we're a fairly small company. We do, however, deal with companies from around the world. So as Sophie mentioned, clients from Germany, from Switzerland, from America. We've worked with clients in China as well. So very international business. And previously, our recruitment has been very much driven by graduates. We always employ graduates or people with experience in marketing, because, frankly, it was easier. Training up someone in marketing to a level where they can go out and advise a client and realistically advise someone who is an experienced marketing manager is a challenge. So I'll be honest, we were quite nervous and worried about whether apprenticeships would help, whether we get the right sort of people, or whether the graduate approach was the best way to go. But of course, there is one clear benefit with apprentices, and that's there's lots of government subsidies and support. To be honest, I mean, we looked at this, and we looked at the fact that the apprentice salary is relatively low to compensate for the fact they're getting training, and even so, we still felt that perhaps there was a question as to whether we really wanted to invest the time and the money on something that was unknown. And I think really, to be honest, most people, when they're thinking about apprentices, are worried that this guy's going to turn up. You clearly know there's young people who are enthusiastic, motivated, committed, and you also know there's young people who are a bit more like my friend Bart. We also worried that it's a government scheme. I'm sure most of the people on this call have been in government schemes that have resulted in this kind of level of paperwork. So we were concerned that, yes, sure, maybe it's a relatively low salary and the training's all organised, but perhaps there's endless paperwork and pain to go through. However, despite this, we were struggling to find the right graduates. So we decided to go along, and we actually went along to a session at our local college, Chichester College. The one thing I would say, the thing we found out during this process, is that partnering with the training delivery partner is really important. And Chichester College were fantastic throughout. And I think this makes a huge amount of difference. If your training provider is handling a lot of the paperwork and a lot of the work for you, it really does mean that there's very little overhead in terms of admin and bureaucracy. Frankly, I think I've had 2 meetings, one of which was about 40 minutes and one of which was 30 minutes to complete the paperwork. So it really is quite simple and straightforward. Even the recruitment was easy. So what happened was we approached Chichester College. They said, well, look, we'll just get you some apprentices candidates. If you like them, hire one, start an apprenticeship scheme. If you really think they're wrong, then don't worry. We'll go away and we'll find someone else. And Chichester College, they advertised the apprenticeship vacancy. There is a national website with vacancies, and they handled all the posting of the information about the opportunity. They actually interacted with all the applicants. They took all the questions and also the applications. They filtered the applications, and they actually gave us a short list of candidates that really were very good. We had a couple of people, and to be honest, I think we'd have employed both if we felt confident enough about apprentices. So what happened was we finally picked Freya, and we didn't get Bart. We got Freya. So what I'd like Freya to do is talk a little bit about her experience and what she's learned on the apprenticeship.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm Freya. I'm a Level 2 Marketing Apprentice here at Napier. When I started my apprenticeship, I really spent a lot of my time doing admin tasks. I did some photocopying, filing, and learnt about the processes and the procedures within marketing and all the laws surrounding them. I also spent quite a lot of time making tea. I became best friends with the kettle. This also gave me quite a few friends in the office. One of the campaigns I was really excited to start working on quite early on in my apprenticeship was a direct marketing campaign for one of our clients, until I discovered that I had to remove all but one Matchmaker chocolates out of hundreds of boxes and then post them to the client's potential customers. Safe to say that I now hate Matchmakers. My training really helped my confidence. It boosted my confidence, and I gained a lot of knowledge through the college. I was also really encouraged by Napier and by the college to take learning into my own hands. So I guess I'm now a self-confessed geek, but I'm very proud of the things that I've learned, the articles I've read, and I also attend a lot of webinars myself. As I was doing the training, as I say, my confidence really grew, and I was given more responsibility within Napier. One of the challenges I was given was to help build an interactive data system for one of our clients. This is quite a technical, geeky thing, so I don't know if many of you will understand it. It took a while to get my head around it, but with the support and help from Napier, I've built this, and it's now used for their trade shows all over the world, and also for their internal marketing campaigns. Another thing that I've worked quite hard on and I've learned a lot about is video editing. I'd never done something like this before. I'd sort of gone from taking photos off my little camera to now I edit most of the videos for one of our biggest clients, Microchip, and these are distributed in their YouTube channels, in their emailers, directly to their customers. One thing I really enjoy about my apprenticeship is I've been given the chance to get involved in a lot of networking events. I've helped promote our company to journalists as well as our clients in their natural habitat, of course, which is the pub. This has given me a lot of insight into the industry, and it's helped me build a lot of connections and build relationships with some of the most influential people in our industry. Following on from the networking, I soon started pitching articles to journalists, and I organised press tours for one of Napier's clients, Lancia. When I reflect back on the last year, I've actually closed my apprenticeship last week, and I'm now a full-time employee at Napier. I can't believe how far I've come and the amount I've learned. I'm incredibly proud of my apprenticeship, and I wouldn't be in the situation I am now or in the industry I'm in without the support of the training provider and of Napier themselves. So I'm going to hand back over to Mike to talk about the rest of our journey as an apprentice.
Thanks, Freya. So I think Freya kind of glossed over it, but the great news is Freya started her apprenticeship just over a year ago, and last week she actually moved to become a full-time permanent employee with Napier. So our first apprentice actually joined us after the apprenticeship, which is something we're really, really pleased about. So we're delighted with that. We feel Freya's been a great success. A lot of our clients have been very pleased. Not only some of the clients you heard when she talked about some of her projects, but actually she also worked directly with one client who was very keen to actually have her managing the account. So even though they knew she was an apprentice, they felt she had the knowledge and the maturity to actually help them go and run their marketing campaign. So it's been incredibly successful. As I say, a year ago we were really questioning whether apprenticeships would be worth it, whether we get any value out of it. 1 year on, we've got a new full-time employee. We've also got a second apprentice, who's Bryn. He joined about 6 months ago, and we're already looking to hire a new apprentice basically to replace Freya. So it looks like a lot of our growth in terms of the team and the people will be driven through apprenticeships, and we're really, really pleased about that. We're still looking for graduates and still hiring graduates, but we've got a much broader range of people that we're recruiting from. And when you're in marketing, a lot of the things that are happening are very new. So social media marketing, for example, it's great to have young, enthusiastic people join the company. So I don't know whether everyone else will find magic like Mickey when he was the Sorcerer's Apprentice, but we found the apprenticeship process not only very beneficial, but also very straightforward, which I think is the main point I want to say. I've certainly worked with other government schemes where, you know, perhaps you've ended up with grants to support a certain project and you feel you've put more time in than money you actually get out in the end. With the apprenticeships, it really is set up to be a very easy and straightforward thing. If anything, it's probably easier to hire an apprentice than to hire a normal employee. And so from that point of view, I think it's great for small businesses. There's no need to have someone, you know, handling all the admin because, frankly, there just isn't any. And the best training providers do actually do a lot of that for you. So that's really what we wanted to say. We'd really love to have some questions. And I'll hand back to Sophie.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And it was great actually hearing it a second time because I picked up on lots of things that I'd missed out on the first time around how straightforward the whole process was. It just it's really refreshing to hear because I think that's one of the biggest concerns that businesses have when they start the whole apprenticeship process. Just before we go on to questions, I think I'll just quickly run through the apprenticeship process because then we can have all prep questions that relate to you know, how the process works as well. So I've put together a few slides here just to help us with this. So what exactly is an apprenticeship? It's a real job. So it's a real job that has training alongside it. And it's for young people and for people of all ages, in fact, that it's a way to earn while they learn. I think one of the things that businesses don't realise is that they aren't necessarily taking this individual on short term, they're taking this person on as an employee. So if you're committed long term, it's a great solution for you. And they can really, as Mike pointed out, it can really help businesses grow their own talent and develop a motivated, skilled and qualified workforce. So there's a lot in it for small businesses as a way to develop their business and to bring people into the business longer term. If you want to recruit an apprentice, this is your first port of call really, is to contact the National Apprenticeship Service, and they've got SME specialists to guide you through the whole process. This is a telephone number and this is the website that you go to. You go to gov.uk and you search for employer and apprentice, and all of the kind of official information about apprenticeships are on there. Now, because it's a national site and they're dealing with thousands of businesses, there are other ways in which you can start the process as well. So contact them first, find out how they can help you, find out how they can connect you with training providers. There is also on gov.uk a way that you can search for training providers yourself. And I did this earlier today for this sector. So I'm based up in the northeast, so I searched for training providers that could look that delivered marketing apprenticeships. And it was a little bit bamboozling at first because I didn't know anything about the training providers, and I work, in this area, but I recognised a few. There's a lot of private training providers there, and essentially, I guess the message is to shop around, to contact a few. Like Mike said, it's making an apprenticeship work for your business is all about finding a really great training provider that's with you along the process, that can do much of the admin and the recruitment process that you normally as a business would have to deal with. So finding the right training provider is absolutely key. So do an online search yourself, ask peers in the industry, ask other businesses who they've worked with, and use Apprenticemakers. And I'm not just saying this because it's Apprenticemakers, but also that is one of the reasons it's there. It's there to help you connect with other businesses in your sector or region and ask them, who did you use? How did it work for you? How much work did it take you to actually go through the process? Also, you can ask on social media, and training providers are, are pretty hot on trying to find businesses to work for. So, normally if you're asking these kind of questions, training providers will be keen to help. There's also, in the Small Business Guide that I referred to earlier, and I will be sending a link to this afterwards, there's a list of questions to ask training providers around what they can offer you in terms of a service. And so those questions are listed in that guide for you to use as a reference tool. So when people talk about apprenticeships, this is often the bit that people that don't work in this field get slightly bamboozled with. So what does it mean when you're talking about a level 2, level 3, and level 4, 5, 6, 7? Okay, so level 2 is equivalent to a GCSE level. Level 3 is around A-level level, and level 4 to 7 is around foundation degree or degree level. So that equates to the complexity of the apprenticeship and often the length of the apprenticeship. It needs to last at least 1 year, no matter what level it's at. I went on to gov.uk yesterday and I did a quick search on marketing roles, and when I looked in the tool that was there for employers, it brought up lots of different frameworks. It was quite hard to get my head around, but what I did then was I looked at what you would look at if you were trying to find a marketing role, and that's quite straightforward actually. And these are all the different kind of marketing roles that popped up for prospective apprentices. And so it gives you a kind of idea of the kind of frameworks that your apprentice could be working to. Now, so it means that when you're going to speak to a training provider, you could say, I'm really looking for someone that's going to be a market researcher, for instance. And if they don't offer that apprenticeship, they might be able to offer something that's similar, or they might not be able to help in that instance. So that's one of the considerations when you're looking for a training provider. Often you'll find the training provider first, and they will be the ones that guide you through the process and help you work out what your job spec is. But you might have a very clear idea of what you want. So it's worth knowing what the frameworks are in case they can't deliver what you want and you think you might be able to find that elsewhere. How much does recruiting an apprentice cost? Well, as I said, it's an employee, so they have a wage. And at the moment, the minimum wage for an apprentice is £2.73 for 16 to 18-year-olds, or £2.73 for anyone 90 plus that's in their first year of an apprentice. Everyone else gets the minimum wage for their age. As you all know, so this is particularly low. So often businesses offer more than this to entice people to come and work for their business. But the official figures on that are the apprentice minimum wage. It's worth checking what other employers are offering, but your training provider would be able to advise on that, what they think is a reasonable salary to offer that would attract the right candidates. In terms of the training costs are covered 100% for 16 to 18-year-olds, around 50% for 19 to 23-year-olds, and if they're 24 plus, there's often just a contribution. Again, this can change from training provider to training provider, because those training providers that are delivering a great deal of apprentices may have additional incentives for employers that are bringing in older apprentices. So it's worth asking how that works with their training organisation. There's also additional grants that are available for small businesses. If you've got less than 50 employees, you can be applicable for the age grant, it's called, and so that means you get $1,500 per apprentice, and so that's if your apprentice is age 16 to 24 as well, and you can claim this for up to 5 apprentices. So that's a real incentive for small businesses, and it covers some of that management overhead that can sometimes occur in the first couple of months of taking on an apprentice. In terms of recruitment, again, there's a really useful guide in the Small Business Guide around how to manage the recruitment process. This is a short summary of it. One thing to bear in mind is that recruiting apprentices is often different to recruiting a more experienced member of staff, in that it's difficult to know how to assess them when they may not have much work experience under their belts. And so there's loads of ideas around what could work for small businesses that businesses are quite willing to share around how they assess whether someone had attention to detail or what their interests were and how that might apply to the role. So there's lots of ideas around from other businesses on how to manage that recruitment process. And again, the training provider is a very useful source of knowledge on that. So other things to consider. Work experience. So often in marketing agencies, agencies offer short-term work experience to people during the summer holidays or at other times, and this could be something that leads to an apprentice. So just because you're working with a training provider, it doesn't mean that apprentice has to be recruited by them and sent to you. You might have someone in mind that you've already taken on work experience that you could talk to a training provider about putting on an apprenticeship. So it doesn't need to be someone that comes by that route. It could be someone that you know already. If you are interested in work experience, traineeships are quite interesting, because that can give you an opportunity to offer that work experience person some training alongside, some kind of work readiness training and maths and English training alongside a work experience placement. And that placement needs to be anything from 6 weeks to 6 months and have at least 100 hours of work experience within it. Again, that's a really good kind of try before you buy thing when it comes to apprenticeships. If you take on someone as a trainee, it could be that after that period of time you think it would be great to keep them on as an apprentice. Another thing to bear in mind is that there are things called apprenticeship training agencies. And if you feel as a business you're not in a position to employ an apprentice fully, or you don't feel confident employing an apprentice fully at this point, it could be worth finding out about ATAs, because they recruit and employ the individual on behalf of the business, and then that apprenticeship lasts for the finite amount of time the apprenticeship is going on. And often the business will then choose to then take that individual on as an apprentice afterwards. So again, it's quite a useful way for businesses to trial the apprenticeship process without going through the whole recruitment and employment process. Useful sources of info. So gov.uk, that's your starting point. Also see the Apprenticemakers useful links page. I will send links to these after the webinar, because there's all sorts of information there that would be really useful for small businesses. Likewise, the Small Business Guide to Apprenticeships, which I've talked about a few times. Also, I think businesses often are quite reliant on, once they've spoken to a National Apprenticeship Service or to a training provider, that being their sole source of information around apprenticeship. If you've started the apprenticeship process and it's not progressing, or you can't find a way to actually move it forward, then do your own research, go onto Apprenticemakers, see what other help is out there. There's, particularly in this area around creative apprenticeships, there's an awful lot happening, and so you might find another route to actually progress your apprenticeship. Also, you might find ways to promote your business and the work it's done around apprenticeships once you have got apprenticeships underway. And again, I would urge you to join Apprenticemakers and ask questions throughout the whole process, from finding a training provider to the recruitment, the frameworks, the funding, and so on. I think there's an opportunity there to get the answers you need. I mean, for the ideal scenario is that for all businesses it's as straightforward as it was for Napier, and they're a great example of that. But we don't want businesses to be put off if they're not able to progress apprenticeships in a quite so simple way, and so that's why all these other resources are there to help businesses through the process. Okay, that's my bit done. You still there, Mike and Freya?
We're still here.
Great stuff. Okay, so I wonder whether we could kick off with a few questions for you that would be really good to find out a little bit more about how it's worked for you. Around the recruitment process, Mike, so this issue of businesses not knowing quite how to recruit people that haven't got those years of work experience under their belt, how did you interview them? What were you looking for?
I think that's a really good question, Sophie. It is difficult to interview someone when, I mean, particularly in our case, we're used to assessing people who are graduates or maybe had a fair bit of work experience, and then trying to interview someone who's got very limited experience. We actually found that, the best way to do it is look for someone who's enthusiastic and interested and shows the ability to understand marketing. So we were asking a lot of questions about, consumer brands and what they felt about their marketing, things they're familiar with, which are only indirectly related to our marketing, which is for highly technical business-to-business brands. But it showed that enthusiasm, and it showed the ability to, learn and understand, and that's really what we recruited for.
Yeah. I think, I've spoken to a few businesses in recent months where they've done things like asked them to complete a Lego model for an engineering one, for instance. Not really to see how well they complete the model, but to see about their attention to detail and how they approach problems. And they actually take a piece out as well, which is a bit mean, I think, to actually see how they tackle facing issues along the way. So I think there's lots of interesting ways to assess individuals without necessarily asking them direct questions about their work experience. And often it's about the enthusiasm and the likelihood of them being able to work with the team that can shine through if you can pitch it right. We're actually developing a guide at the moment with the CIPD, an HR guide, to give some ideas around that. And so when those are ready, if you're in the Apprenticemakers community, you'll be getting notification of that and being able to find out how you can, different approaches to interviewing people. So how did you manage the first few weeks in the business? Like, did you assign a mentor, or was it a case of, you know, there you go, let's get cracking? How did it work?
Again, I think it is difficult. You've got someone who's coming in with really no knowledge of the business or what we do. I mean, Freya, I think, made some great points in her presentation that the reality is the first few weeks were fairly basic tasks. You know, it was things like photocopying, making cups of tea, but it's really to make sure that the apprentice that we've got is able to fit in with the business, get to know the people here, whilst we're also trying to build some skills so they can start to really deliver some of the more technical marketing work. And I think, you know, it's important to keep meeting with the apprentice frequently during that time, make sure that they're happy, they're not struggling, they know where they're going and what's expected of them, and then really build those tasks and jobs up slowly, so you don't just literally drop them in at the deep end and then they can't do things. I think a lot of what you know, starting with an apprentice about for the first 3 or 4 weeks is really about building confidence rather than necessarily purely job skills. Yeah, I totally agree. And many of us do start like that, don't we? Many of us do start by making the tea and just getting to know what it's like to work in an office. And that takes some getting used to for anybody at whatever stage they start, whether they're starting after school, A-levels, or as a graduate. So, you know, I think that's a useful settling in activity around just kind of getting to know the team and things. So funding support, did you receive the age grant as a small business? Was that something that was successful to you? Yeah, that applied both to Freya and also to Bryn, our second apprentice. It wasn't, I'll be honest, when we started on the journey and started looking at apprenticeships, we didn't know about the grant. So it actually turned out to be quite a nice surprise as we went through. But yeah, and again, I mean, it was very straightforward. There appears, you know, to be no real issues in getting the grant if you qualify for it. So it definitely helps. It's definitely a nice addition. Yeah. I mean, it doesn't come until around 13 weeks, I think, until after the apprentice has started. So it's not a reason for businesses to start the apprenticeship process by any means, but it's, like you say, it's a kind of sweetener in a way, isn't it? It covers some of that overhead of the time involved in doing the process, although it does sound like it was particularly straightforward for you guys, so particularly helpful. It was, I can't remember whether it was 13 weeks, it was a long way into Freya's apprenticeship that the money appeared, so yeah, there certainly is a significant delay until you get it, which I guess is something that says treat it as a, you know, a nice extra rather than the reason why you're doing it. Yeah. And how much management time do you have you found it has taken you as a business? To be honest, we've found that compared to a normal employee, the additional management time is fairly low. There's obviously quite a bit of a time in the first 1 to 2 months to help people, you know, help the apprentice get up to speed, get to know people, build their confidence. But actually, once Freya had, you know, really got herself embedded into the business, there was very little additional time. We do have people from the training provider coming in once a month. Not every month will be a time I sit down with them. I may just, you know, say hello. But really, it's compared to, I guess, a good process with an ordinary younger employee, the difference in time is actually relatively small. Right, okay. And that's a good point, actually. How often do you go out to college, Freya? How often do you go and do training off-site?
So we do, in my apprenticeship, I do off-site training on a Wednesday evening every week for 3 hours.
Okay.
At the college, and then we have a workplace assessor come in every 6 weeks just to go through my MVQ file that I work on independently. Okay. You do the technical certificate at the college, and then you do within the 3 hours on a Wednesday, and then you do the MVQ folder separately.
Okay. And do you find that hard work to do alongside your work? Does it take a lot of your time?
No, I can't say it does take a lot of time, but I signed up to the apprenticeship, and when I signed up, it was expressed to me the time that I should be spending on it, and I spend a lot of my own personal time as well as my time in work doing my folder. So I can't say it comes with the apprenticeship. It's it's not a huge amount of time, but to get the qualification and to understand the job and to provide evidence and things, a lot of it incorporates with the work that I am actually doing day to day here. So no, not a huge amount of time.
Okay. And there's a lot of kind of criticism around whether young people are ready for work and are going to be committed to a job role. What are both your thoughts on that? Should businesses be recruiting young people? Is it too much of a commitment, or does it work for small businesses?
I mean, to be honest, from my point of view, I think businesses just need to hire good people. And generally speaking, talent is not directly related to age. There's some great young people. There's, frankly, younger people who are not so committed. But equally, there's older people who aren't committed and aren't good hires as well. So I personally don't think that age is that important. I think it's much more about the talent and the enthusiasm. The great thing about younger people is typically they're much more able and more committed to the training. And that's something we've really valued from the apprenticeship scheme.
Yeah, I do agree with Mike. I think it's down to the person at the end of the day, and I wanted to get into marketing for a long time, and this apprenticeship has allowed me to get into it. So yeah, I agree with Mike.
Yeah. And that's a good point, that consistently every business that we've interviewed as part of Apprenticemakers has said a similar thing, and so it's I think it's down to the individuals, and employing people has its issues, but they're not necessarily age related, and I think it's quite refreshing to hear small businesses saying that too, so that's good. Some businesses worry about retention. Is this something you've got any advice on? So something that businesses sometimes say, but what if we go to the effort of supporting their learning and then at the end of it they just disappear? What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's a very good question. We obviously tried to make sure that we kept Freya. I mean, maybe Freya would be a better person to answer as to why she felt she wanted to stay with Napier.
I had absolutely no intention of not continuing my employment at Napier when my apprenticeship finished. I didn't sign up to the apprenticeship and commit my time and efforts into doing the work. Obviously, Napier permitting to offer me a job, but I didn't sign up to it to not continue my apprenticeship. I think a lot of apprentices must go in with that same mindset as me. I mean, it's a low wage, it is hard work, you have committed to it, and I think if you come out of it straight away and go and look for a job elsewhere, I think you're mad, to be honest, because I had no intention of doing that, and I'm thankful that Napier have taken me on and saw that in me.
Great. And so, would you say that businesses should consider apprenticeships if they haven't already? What's your kind of recommendation to small businesses out there?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think, if you look at our presentation, we've been, genuinely surprised at how well apprenticeships work. I'm sure we'll be taking on apprentices that we don't subsequently offer, permanent roles to. Some of them won't work quite as well as Freya worked out, but overall, it is a great way to hire young people and get them trained. And I think any issues that people raise about the hiring of apprentices in terms of retention or commitment could equally be applied to any other employees. So I think a lot of the objections really are misguided. To me, the biggest challenge is to try and bring up taking an apprenticeship to be considered as a viable option for going to university. And I know, in the fairly recent past, there's been a big push for as many people as possible to go to university. And I think for a lot of young people, actually an apprenticeship is a better approach. And so if the apprenticeship process, builds a reputation, I think that can only be good for employers with more people going to apprenticeships.
Yeah, completely. So on that, Freya, why did you consider doing an apprenticeship instead of university, or instead of doing a kind of graduate course, what were your thoughts around it?
University was never really an option for me. I did have a full-time job prior to my apprenticeship, so I did take a wage cut to come in and be an apprentice. But to get into the industry that I'm in, it was something, I looked at different options, different ways, different routes of getting into it, and university just wasn't an option for me. I wanted on-the-job training, and I feel that doing my apprenticeship, I had more of a chance of gaining a full-time job at the end of it than, say, university leaver or graduate coming into a company. I think the on-the-job training is the most appealing part of it. And even if at the end of my apprenticeship Napier hadn't have offered me a role, I think I would have felt more confident in the work environment and in this kind of environment to go into another job in another company than I would fresh out of university with none of that experience or very little.
Yeah, that's fantastic, and such a great advocate for apprenticeships. And I think that's absolutely true now. I think that what businesses are looking for is experience and knowledge around the actual job role. So it's really refreshing to hear. But how was it perceived by your peers, those that went to university? How are you faring alongside them in their careers at the moment?
So there's been sort of three different views, I think. So when I thought about starting an apprenticeship, I spoke to my friends that at the time were in their last year of university, and they thought I was mad. They said, you're taking a wage cut, it's really hard work, how are you going to progress? Because I think I shared the same view of apprentices as I think a lot of people do or did, that it would be a lot of tedious work for very little money, glorified sort of cleaner, which I'm very much against that opinion now, having become one myself. So the initial thoughts were sort of, why would you do an apprenticeship? Why wouldn't you go to university? You're not too old. And then their views sort of changed as I carried on my apprenticeship, and they became more surprised and they were shocked at the responsibility and prospects that I had from doing my apprenticeship. And then there was the third view, which now they've left university, and a lot of them are finding it really difficult to get into an industry that they've worked so hard to get a degree in, whereas I'm just starting off my career. So, those views.
That's good to hear, isn't it? And I think, one question has just come in, and this is probably quite relevant at this point, is someone asking whether you feel like an MVQ is accepted within the industry as a degree. Is it as transferable as a degree might sound, or I think attitudes around this are changing, particularly around at higher degree level.
Yeah, I mean I've successfully completed my level 2 MVQ now, and due to my enthusiasm, my tutor suggested that I go on to do a level 4 course, which is a higher marketing course at the college. So I've managed to skip a year of college. I've skipped the level 3 and I'm going straight onto the level 4 that I'm due to start in September. So yes, the level 2 is respected within our industry. It's all very new within marketing. I think apprentices are very new, but I think the enthusiasm that I show and the maturity, I'm blowing my own trumpet here, but the maturity I show when I meet people within our industry, I think that counteracts the fact that they may think that a level 2 is a low, it's an intermediate qualification. It's not something. It is hard work, but I have found the course to be a lot of it. The challenge has been what I've been doing in the office, the client work.
Yeah, and I think as soon as when you're actually doing something and you can apply it to real projects as well, sure. It suddenly makes sense, where it's all very theoretical when you're at university. But if you're actually in the workplace and you can apply it there and then, it comes easier. The learning comes easier, I think. Because it's obvious then, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Mike, what do you think the perception is in our industry of me just doing a level 2 qualification?
Yeah, I think basically that to a large extent the industry doesn't care. In marketing particularly, people are looking for someone who can bring creativity and ideas to clients to help them improve their campaigns. And that's not necessarily something you have to have a degree for. I think that there's some outstanding graduates and frankly, the marketing industry fights over those people very, very hard. But equally, after certainly a couple of years' experience, whether or not you have a degree, I think, becomes less important, and it's much more how much knowledge you have and how you can apply that. And to be honest, the bit of paper you got in acquiring the knowledge is much less relevant.
Yeah, I would totally agree on that. Around smaller businesses, I just wanted to ask Freya whether you think apprentices in smaller businesses gain any sort of advantages in terms of knowledge and experience.
I mean, from my experience here, I've only done my apprenticeship within a smaller business, so I can't do a direct comparison, but I've been fortunate enough to have direct communication, at my fingertips with the directors of the company, right through to the admin. We're all in an open plan office. We're able to communicate. We're classed on the same floor, if you like. I think working in a smaller business, I've had a bit more exposure as well to influential people in our industry, because I will answer the phone, and they get to know us all on a personal basis. And also, I think the company's been able to focus more on my development because we are a smaller business. They've been able to invest a bit more time in me. I'd like to learn this, or I'd like to do this. It's very much a two-way conversation, as opposed to how I'd imagine it would be in a larger company without that direct contact.
Yeah, it's really useful to know. So finally, is there anything you think that we haven't covered that businesses would find useful, particularly around apprenticeships, or have we covered all bases there? What do you think?
I mean, hopefully it's been a good introduction. I think, it's a pretty obvious thing to say that everybody's experience is going to depend a lot upon the individual they hire as an apprentice. And I think, you've really got to look at it from a business point of view as you're hiring someone, and you're hiring them with the intention that they stay with you permanently, rather than you're getting someone in for a one-year apprenticeship who's fairly low cost, who may or may not work out, but if they don't work out, it's not a big problem. And I think that perhaps, going back to a previous question, is a big difference between smaller businesses and larger enterprises. Is big companies might, be able to hire a large batch of apprentices and figure, 50% is the pass mark, as long as half of them do okay, we're happy. Whereas smaller businesses, they really need to get it right. And we've been really happy with the way our training provider helped us filter candidates, and we turned down quite a few people. And I think that really is the key to success. Hire as though this hire really matters, as though it's a full-time permanent position at a market rate, and with all the intentions of taking that person on. I don't know, Freya, have you got anything else?
I think all I can say from an apprentice point of view is if you're thinking about it, act on it. If you're thinking about taking on apprentices, act on it, because I've got so many friends that wish they could get apprenticeships, and it's just not available because companies aren't taking them on. And I think there is so much talent and opportunity out there, so there's nothing to be afraid of. It's just as scary for us apprentices as it is for you as employers.
Yeah. That's great advice from both of you. And I would just add to your point, Freya, that I'm speaking to a lot of businesses at the moment that are struggling to find apprentices. And so I would urge people that are keen to do apprentices to contact those businesses that they are really interested in. Do an internet search themselves around marketing companies in their area, and drop them an email saying, would you consider recruiting an apprentice? Can I come and see you? Because I think for small businesses, just because they haven't necessarily initiated the process, it doesn't mean they're not interested. And so it's worth kind of putting yourself forward. A webinar we did a couple of months ago with Blue Moon Creative, who are based up near Birmingham. They took on their first apprentice when she knocked on their door and said, I'd like to work for you. I could be your apprentice. And she sort of handed it to them on a plate and said, this is how it works. Would you take me on? And they did. And they went on to recruit 2 more apprentices and went on to win Small Business Apprentice Employer of the Year. So, for people out there looking for apprenticeships, I think, take the initiative like Freya says and just go for it, really. Okay, I think we are free of questions now. I think we must have covered everything. I'd like to really thank you both, Mike and Freya, for joining us for the webinar today. It's been really useful. Your presentation was as good second time round as well first time round. It was great to learn more about your journey. I would just on a couple of things. After the webinar, everybody will receive an email asking them to complete a short questionnaire asking them about the webinar and how they found it. So please give us feedback and let us know what other webinars you'd like to see from Apprenticemakers. I'll also add to that links to resources